Hello and welcome to our panel discussion today at the COSMA 2021 conference. I'm Kurt Laird. I will be your moderator for today's panel discussion. Our topic today is looking at the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on sport management, academic programs, and to some extent, the sport industry itself. This topic came up as a point of conversation between a group of us administrators, and we were talking about how it was affecting each of our institutions. And so we decided that presenting this from an administrative standpoint might be an interesting topic for the COSMA conference. All of our panelists today, including your moderator, we all have backgrounds in sport management. And so we're going to begin by talking about some things in a broad sense, and then we're really going to narrow down to probably some pain points that sport management programs are probably having right now. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce each of our panelists, I should say, to introduce themselves before we get into our questions today. So I'd like each of our panelists to state their name, their position, and the name of their institution. Dr. Kane, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jennifer Kane. I'm the Associate Dean for the College of Education and Human Services at UNF in Jacksonville, Florida.
I'm Damon Andrew. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at Florida State University in Tallahassee.
I'm Heath Hooper. I'm the Dean of the Ledbetter Business at Shorter University in Rome, Georgia.
And I am Dawn Norwood. I'm the Assistant Dean for the School of Sports Sciences and the Program Director for the Master of Sport Management Program at Wingate University in Wingate, North Carolina.
Thank you all for that. We are going to begin with questions. I'm going to pick on Dr. Kane again and begin with our first question. All of you after the response may jump in and ask questions or provide additional commentary to what your experience might be with the question. So to begin, as an administrator, what role did you have on your campus when COVID-19 reached a pandemic level?
So I'm going to speak from two perspectives. One, from the university perspective, I was assigned to be on a task force for a university-wide initiative to keep students and faculty healthy. So that was, and we still meet every week, once a week. And we've done that since the initiation of that committee back this past March. So it's been a lot of communication, a lot of planning. We put together a very detailed plan on how to proceed with keeping our faculty and our student healthy during the pandemic. So as I mentioned, that was from the university level. So I represented our college in those efforts. And then at the college level, I would say I worked primarily with our sport management program to figure out the best way to help our students who were not able to do field experiences. So that's pre-field or internship. So I worked with them very purposefully and strategically and coming up with alternatives to those experiences so that our students would experience, we would hope, the same success in obtaining the skills they would need upon graduation to be successful in the workplace.
It kept you busy. Did any of our other panelists want to chime in?
And I could go into more detail about what that looked like, but that was predominantly my role in the process.
So Kurt, I can speak from kind of here at a smaller private university. So in March, when we got the call that we needed to take everything into online, we were given, each department in college was going to have a week to make sure everything was transferred accordingly into a virtual format and online for the courses and the student access. And for us, it was probably the easiest transition. So he called me on Thursday and said, we'll have until, not the next Sunday, but the next Sunday to have everything virtual. And I told him, I said, we're ready tomorrow. And so that was one of the benefits we had of already having all of our courses set up in an online format with our LMS system for Canvas. So I think the biggest takeaway we took, and we were able to influence other colleges here at Shorter University, was to already have everything in a virtual format. And so we run our traditional courses through the Canvas LMS system. So, in speaking with other similar type institutions such as ours, being a small private university, it's important just to have those, especially the courses and the layout and the assignments, everything in an online format, just in case, on a dime, we do have to eventually go back into a virtual format. So I would say a lot of people have learned from that, but that was my take. From a university level, didn't really have much say in terms of that. That was more of the upper administration, but from our college business, that was how I was able to cooperate and move forward.
At FSU, my role was I had two roles similar to Jen. At the university level, I was elected by the deans to serve as a dean's rep on the academic operations committee. And so that was a group that's responsible for basically the academic side of the house and those operations during the pandemic. And it's chaired by the university registrar, but it also has representatives from the graduate school, undergraduate studies, athletics, libraries, faculty senate, international programs, online programs, IT, facilities management, and other areas. So that group met several times weekly during the beginning of the pandemic, and then is still now meeting at least once a week as part of that. And then as that committee formed recommendations to the provost, and the provost sent out general guidelines to the university, then as in my role as dean, then I would help kind of enact those guidelines and determine how they would be operationalized within the College of Education. For instance, the university put outside a recommendation that they wanted at least one faculty member present in every academic unit, starting in the summer of this past year. And so at least meant that there was some discretion to figure out whether or not there needed to be more in some units. So I worked with the academic units in the college to figure out how we would staff that moving forward.
And similar to the others, I have a dual role at the university, but when the pandemic hit, I found the fortunate circumstance of being pregnant. I actually was on maternity leave. I had just taken maternity leave February 1st, and my son was born on the 14th. And so soon after that, well, that's when everything got shut down, but we were in the beginnings of the pandemic in February. So someone was filling in my role, but I can say that carried on into the fall semester as well. Things were a little more settled because, faculty were going back from the spring and seeing what they had done then, what they could do better. For the most part, my unit, sports sciences, was able to adjust okay. Of course, some of the exercise science courses seem to be a little bit more difficult to put online and deliver that content. I will say it was not so much an advantage. Well, I guess it would be an advantage that the sport management master's program had over everyone, even though it was a bad time for us all. The sport management master's program actually went fully online in fall of 2019. So by the springtime, when everything went into complete chaos, it just continued as normal for the sport management program, and more of the same for the fall. So from a sport management standpoint, specifically with my master's program, no change at all. From an administrator standpoint of the larger unit, it has been a little challenging, but I have a great faculty who are there to, be flexible. Even though it's tough at times, they still got through it. And I do apologize. My son is in the background over here, and he goes to the loud toy right when I'm speaking. So my apologies.
That's perfectly okay. Congratulations, by the way, Dr. Norwood. And I think we're all very
Thank you.
used to that
Thank
at this
you.
point.
I appreciate that. He's not played with that toy in like 3 weeks, and he waits till now to go play with it. Thank you.
Well, I think to encapsulate all that, much like the faculty, our jobs have drastically changed a number of times, maybe since the pandemic is kind of what I'm hearing from all of you, a similar theme. I do want to transition us to a little bit more of a sport management specific question now. And I want to go back to Dr. Norwood to get us started on this one. Internships continue to play a huge role in the education of sport management students, as they have for decades now. How have you handled internships in the COVID-19 environment?
Well, that definitely has been a challenge for us in pretty much every major exercise science, the sport management, especially the graduate and undergraduate is affected. What we ended up doing early on, especially over the summers, that's when a good portion of our undergraduates complete their internship. They still really weren't able to. We saw a lot of students start to look into more digital marketing type of internships. And even those, they didn't have a lot of content or a lot of work to do as they normally would. Like, for instance, with the start of the NBA season coming up, normally in the summer, digital marketing would be very, very, very busy. And since we have a different NBA season, we were still doing the NBA reboot during that time. A lot of the students who did digital marketing internships, they just didn't have a lot to do, but it offered the opportunity for more hands-on teaching. This is the feedback that I received from the industry supervisors. They were able to really take their time more and teach them some of the ins and outs. Other things that we've had to do was move the internship online. Again, not at all ideal, but some of my faculty were able to create more of a professional development in sport type of an online internship learning tool with Canvas, and with that bringing in different types of guest speakers from the industry to offer their tips on when things start back up. Here are the things that we look for in hiring interns and full-time people, and these are the things you should focus on. They also did things like mock interviews, so boosting up the resume and just more of an advice hub, if you will, and professional development, soft skills, etc.
Thank you. Others, how has internship changed for your sport management program? Are you doing similar things to what Dr. Norwood said, or different, or how has it changed?
It's been similar at Florida State. When the pandemic initially began, the university started to go down a path of mandating virtual internship experiences across the university. Then there were a couple of entities that kind of raised their hand, School of Nursing and some others on campus that said, look, we really can't do that. Is there a way that we can provide some exceptions? And so the university allowed us to create an exemption policy or exception policy that the student could apply for. But as part of that, the host for the internship provider had to sign a form agreeing to abide by CDC rules and regulations. And this went for sport management programs, but also for our teacher education programs and others across. So we had a number of students apply for that, and those were supported through the college. We had pretty good relationships and opportunities for our students. I haven't heard too many troubles that we've encountered other than the usual that Dawn mentioned?
So we were actually similarly, we were given a directive that our students were not able to go into the field. And I'm sure there were some exceptions, but in our college, there were not any exceptions. So we just kind of decided as a group that we would not allow students in the field. And I was really proud of our sport management faculty. We came up with 4 courses that would equal that 12 hours that our students would take in lieu of a formal internship. And what was interesting about that was 2 of them, one was an intro to research and one was a case study analysis course. And the intro to research course, if the students had a GPA we set a threshold of 3.3, I think 3.4. If they met that threshold, they were able to take that course and also get graduate level credit for the course. And the reason we liked that was we were hoping and thought maybe those students who were graduating, if we were still in a pandemic, they may want to continue into our graduate program if the job market was down, and that would be a good option for them. And we had probably we had a good number of students take advantage of that. So the other 2 courses were around professional development. So one of them was centered around LinkedIn and doing LinkedIn badging so they could beef up their credentials. And then also a personal branding course so that they were able, once they were able to market themselves. And hopefully those skills would help them get a job in the industry. So what was really kind of interesting and cool to me is we had a student from a recent graduate who spoke to our board of trustees recently. And one of the things he said was he didn't feel disadvantaged in not doing that internship because of all this experiences that he had leading up to internship. So our students felt very engaged up to that point. So they were through coursework and projects that they did in the community. He already felt very prepared for the workforce. So those are the kind of things that we focused on. And I think we're a good reminder that we need to continually engage our students and not just have them depend on that one culminating final experience in case, as we saw, that's not an option for them. So I was just, like I said, I was very proud of the faculty for coming together and thinking through those skills and really helping students gain what they needed to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can feed off of that, Jennifer. Thanks for sharing that. Our experience was similar to Don's, and kind of developing that professional development. Some mock interviews, bringing in some speakers. One thing that really was advantageous for us was in the local community. Some students wanted to do internships, back at home or wherever it may be, and we had a lot of local sport organizations introduce projects that they needed to be completed, such as maybe a risk management plan or, updating media guidelines or updating social media or website. And so we were able to get some ideas and projects in place to where our students could actually, conduct some hands-on experience virtually with some of these organizations and businesses. And so that was beneficial for us, as well as also doing more on campus. Our athletic department on campus activities, we were able to utilize our students that way. Instead of putting them in, an organization or business outside of Shorter, we were able to utilize that opportunity to incorporate internships on campus.
That's a lot of creativity there, I tell you. A lot of different solutions, and the bottom line is, you all are thinking about students and their learning experience, and that's what it's all about. So, but great ideas. I want to go to another question now. Again, very sport management specific. I want to start with Dr. Andrew with this one. We witnessed the reduction and in some cases complete cancellation of sporting events. How much do you believe sport management program enrollments are being affected by the negative impacts felt in the sport industry?
Kurt, I imagine the impact is going to be different based upon the university. I think student demand at our program has consistently been strong pre-pandemic. We are unfortunately unable to accept as many students as we are, we have to reject a lot more students than we were able to accept. And we only admit a small percentage of the applicants. But student demands and applications have actually increased during the pandemic, particularly at the master's level, which has helped make the program even more competitive. Some of this may be due to some laid off workers in the sport industry or other industries that have decided to return for additional education. We haven't noticed anything other than the short-term impact of an increased interest in the program. It'll be interesting to see, I think, maybe 1 or 2 years from now, whether you see that being kind of a blip, and whether or not all the jobs in the sport industry that were there pre-pandemic will fully recover.
I would say that I don't think we've seen that much of a change in enrollment. If anything, we actually had a little bit of an increase. That was for the master's program in the spring, from what we typically bring in for spring. I think that for those who are those diehard sports fans, they're still hanging on, wanting to do sport. So pandemic or not, I think that decision has already been made. Now, how they feel once they get in and find out, oh wait, I don't actually get to sit and watch the game. I have to actually work behind the scenes and I don't see the game. They might feel differently about sport. But for now, I think sport, as you all know, is one of those things that is, no matter what, it could be a sinking ship, and people are drawn to it and are going to remain faithful to it until there's just no way for them to actually pursue it. So in that way, I think we've been pretty fortunate, all things considered.
Yeah, Kurt, with us here at Shorter, we've had some opportunities there. I would say we were riding a really high note with our sport management program. We had just got to volunteer at the Super Bowl down in Miami, and we had sent 13 students down there to work the Super Bowl in Miami. And then we had gotten an email probably about 2 weeks before the pandemic started that we were going to have 10 spots at the Final Four in Atlanta. And we were really excited about that. And then we had heard Daytona 500, we may have some spots there. And as we know, those events were canceled. And so that led us into more of a local sense. Obviously, not being able to work those big stages was, kind of a disappointment to students, but they understood the whole realm of things and why it was occurring, and really dug back into the community. So, for example, we just had a women's pro tennis event here at the tennis center in Rome. And then the ACC tournament for tennis will be here in April in Rome, Georgia. And we already have spots kind of lined up for that. So we've kind of curtailed it back to a local opportunity there with our students. And in terms of our program and enrollment, our graduate numbers have increased due to a lot of part our student athletes getting an extra year of eligibility. So a lot of our seniors that were graduating in May that didn't get to compete in their men's and women's basketball, baseball, whatever it may be, they've decided to continue their eligibility but pursue the master's degree. So they finished the undergrad and now pursuing a master's degree. So that's really helped, increase the master degree population and enrollment for those numbers.
I don't know. I haven't noticed that we've dropped off either in enrollment. We've stayed pretty consistent over the years. We get a pretty strong group of students in each. We are rolling admissions. So what I do think we may see, and we've seen this just in general admissions, we may see some local students who were thinking it was a great idea to go away, to Florida State, and may now stay home and enroll at their local, at UNF or our state college. So, those are the kind of things that I'm not sure how long that trend will last. But I do think there's been some of that. They're not getting the same college experience by going away, so why not stay? in the local area. So I think those kind of variables have helped our enrollment stay steady. So we really have not seen a drop in our enrollment either. So a little bit of a concern though are jobs, and how well these students are going to fare in the job market. I think probably we should all be a little concerned about that. But as Damon mentioned, if you know, a sport goes back to normal, or what as close to normal as possible, we hope that market jumps back up. But I have to say, I think we all should be a little bit concerned about whether the number, maintaining that high level number of students, if they're all going to be successful in getting jobs.
You know, y'all have just spoken about, and we talk about it in our classes, the demand for sport itself. And because your enrollments haven't dipped, I think this is a textbook example of, I think Dr. Norwood began by saying there's the, you know, the passion or the desire to be around sport or to be in sport. And we need to continue to make sure we promote that to our upper administrations, that our major is very steady, and people are still wanting to be sport management majors. So these are that's encouraging to hear from all of you. I guess I have a final question then that I'd like to begin with Dr. Hooper on. And that is kind of encapsulating our discussion for today. What positive key takeaways have you learned working through COVID-19 conditions? And how has your sport management program adjusted to this new normal?
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. So I think it's good to discuss how we can improve. Obviously, we've had some time away, you know, being virtual. You can start to look at how are things running in a virtual format. And we have programs that are 100% online. And as I mentioned, our undergrad classes are also rolled out in the LMS. I think it's a real great opportunity just to reflect on how your online programs are running. We were able to update, our sport management faculty did a really good job of updating the content within each of the courses, and also, you know, integrating COVID-19 and the effect it's had in the sports world. I think it's important for our students to understand and recognize the impact that it's having and the impact it will have. So it's really given us an opportunity to update our content, update our curriculum, and continue to think about how we can innovate. Students have also realized that nothing is, you know, promised at this point in time, you know, with sporting events or with jobs, as Jennifer mentioned. It's important they have to work even harder now to kind of be more successful in that aspect.
I think Keith pointed out a real good example. It'll be interesting to see how COVID-19, the long-term impacts on online programs and interest in that. In our college, we have a wide range of programs, including the #1 ranked instructional assistance and learning technology program in the country that's focused on online education. But we also have faculty who have been very resistant to teaching online in any shape, way, or form. And it's been, I guess, neat to see how some of those faculty have actually changed their minds and have realized the same flexibility that can be available for students in online that can also be available for faculty, depending upon how the course is designed. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how many of those faculty come back, and we've already had a couple of them, a couple of programs put in paperwork to offer an online option for their program. So we'll see how that goes. I think the invited speakers and lecture series, with all those having to flip to virtual, that's allowed programs to invite speakers without needing to cover travel costs or arrange for on-campus parking, which is a big issue here. So we're also expanding our partnerships with nearby universities like FAMU. So a lot of our education invited speakers for education programs here at FSU. Why not make sure that the doctoral students and graduate students at FAMU have that same opportunity, and likewise, they're working to do the same, so that we really just share those opportunities across both universities. So those partnerships are getting stronger. I think virtual student life options are improving. I was on a Zoom call last week with UNC Chapel Hill Chancellor Kevin Guskowitz, and he talked about it at UNC. They created a program called Carolina Away to support their nearly 7,000 international students who were unable to enter the U.S. for the fall 2020 semester. And the program included a 15 credit hour curriculum, as well as live streaming of campus concerts and other events to help those international students who weren't able to start their semester and their programs at UNC Chapel Hill feel like they were still part of the action. I think that could actually be a good strategy for us, even for domestic students who might be studying abroad in our programs, so that they can stay in touch with campus life, and as well as alumni who might be future donors to the university. I think academic advising will be forever changed. At FSU, we've really adopted a strong face-to-face approach to all of our academic advising, and it's been held up as a best practice supporting student retention, and those numbers have increased, but we're finding actually better engagement and fewer missed appointments with virtual advising. So I think that in the future at FSU, you're going to see more of a blended opportunity and maybe even an on-call virtual advisor that you would just go on an app and be able to get that on-demand information from an academic advisor. Faculty interviews have all moved to virtual, and I think search committees seem to be more willing to have a larger semifinalist and even finalist pools for positions since travel is not involved, and that has actually helped give more candidates a chance to interview. In some cases, we've seen candidates do better in the interview process than maybe they would have estimated based upon how they look on paper. It's also given us more diverse pools, so we're excited about that. International partnerships have both been helped and hurt by the pandemic. I think that for existing partnerships, it's actually helped a little bit because there's been an increased acceptance of the video conferencing as an alternative to a face-to-face meeting. But new partnerships, while they've been more challenging, they've not been impossible to initiate. And I've heard about some examples at different universities of how they actually started new international partnerships after the pandemic began.
So I'll echo a few of the things that that Damon mentioned, because I think they'll be probably true certainly for us as well with the way in which we do advising. I completely agree. That's gonna have a different look, and those are some of the positive things, right, that come out of these kinds of times where you really have to think outside the box and try new things. So I think there'll be things like that that will change probably for all of us. But also just talk a minute about the deepening of partnerships, because I think that's what I've recognized the most for us in sport management is, we used to send students out, right? So Jacksonville is a very sport rich area, so we have a lot of opportunity. We send students out everywhere, right? And that's great, and our students have a lot of opportunity, but it doesn't really it didn't lend itself to really deeper partnerships. So for example, we started an executive in residence program, and we've had two this past academic year with the PGA Tour. And we've had two of their top executives who specialize in data analytics serve as executive in residence for us. And it's just been an amazing deepening of that partnership and how willing they are to step in and help us and really dig deep into our curriculum. We started a sport data analytics lab that they're a huge part of. So it's really been an opportunity, I think, for us all to think outside the box and figure out how we can do business better. And in some cases, taking distance away and taking travel and parking on campus and, all of those kind of just things that, are sometimes distractors and get in the way of us cooperating, collaborating. I think those things have been made easy through the virtual environment. So I do think, I think people do still, kind of hunger for that personal face-to-face time. But I do think that we will forever be also engaging in these virtual environments a lot more, just again, for the things that I mentioned. So I've just been really impressed at how the sport community has just jumped in and really helped us be innovative during this time. And certainly it will help them as well in the end.
I second everything that you all have said for the most part. And I think with us, it definitely has had us be a lot more creative about how we deliver instruction. And also with the hiring as well, we've been able to get some good candidates in with being online because it fits better with their schedules. We've even found success with moving PE courses, our PE 101, the health and wellness course online, and students have been very amenable to that format, especially for that particular course. And so it's been good in that respect. It has been good to push some professors out of their comfort zone to actually use Canvas. Making those things a requirement now has forced them to actually use it even though they didn't want to. And then we found that some actually found they liked it, and it has created a pathway forward where I think coming in the fall or whenever this is all said and done, we will see the norm look like an option of blended courses, more solely online courses, and and students having more of an option of how they want to receive instruction. So we're excited about that for sure. And then as far as the sport industry goes, we're just trying our best to build up our partnerships as well. So, and I think that's my cue. So I'm gonna end it there. But I think being online, COVID has just forced creativity and forced us to think outside the box. We even held our own uh, a symposium, a sport forum online, and the students were forced to get creative and do some critical thinking. And I was impressed with that, delivering content through TikTok. Who knew? And it's been really good. So I'm actually excited about the impact that it has had on higher education curriculum, and even again with the partnerships with sport. Now, I will say this, not to be negative neighbor, but I just want to add to the information, both pros and cons. I have had some organizations in place of an internship, since they weren't able to offer the usual internship with their sport organization, particularly the NBA. I've had some teams contact me about doing some webinars with our students at a price. And so I'm not really clear on how, maybe what the thought process was behind that. It was, promoted as get in front of some top level executives with the company, and they call them master classes. And I think the concept is great, but given the reason for why we are in this position anyway, and understanding that we have a lot of people who are out of work. And so we're fortunate to even have some students that are still enrolled, because enrollment has dropped for a lot of universities. And so I think maybe the boat may have been missed on that a little bit to, hey, we can't give the internships where we wouldn't be paying you anyway, but instead we have a master's class, and university can pay that tab of 5,000, it's $5,000 range or something like that. So I thought that was kind of striking to me. So
Well, you have all basically, you fulfilled the intent of our panel discussion today. We all, from our different institutions, have experienced different things, and we've learned different lessons. And I think what's important is we share those lessons with one another, because I don't know about you, but I've learned an awful lot today. So I think we fulfilled a mission of our panel discussion. I want to thank our panelists for their participation and for sharing their insight with us today. And it's just a reminder, we've got a question and answer session with our panel and myself that will be held on February 11th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Again, we want to thank you for joining us today, and wish you all very well. And I hope you have a great COSMA conference. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for those that are attending, and thank you to the presenters. Today, for the effect of COVID-19 on sports management programs from an administrative perspective. We have Kurt Laird, Heath Cooper, Damon Andrew, and Jennifer Kane present today. And then Don Norwood was also an author on this presentation. If you look at the chat, for those that would like to ask questions, we have the instructions in the chat on how to do that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Since we've already done the pre-recorded session, just to kind of give again what our topic was, this came about as a group of administrators. We're having a discussion. There's a group of us that get together pretty regularly. We're having a discussion about just all the different ways that our jobs and our campuses have been impacted by COVID-19 and just how different things are. But not only that, but how all of our campuses have tried to handle this in a different sort of way. All of the panelists that I have here today, I was moderator for the presentation, but all the panelists and myself, we all have backgrounds in sport management. And so we wanted to discuss it broadly and then really get down to the details of some of the specific things we might address or see in sport management. And so that's what we talked about. We touched on internships, we touched on enrollment, we touched on just, how our own jobs have changed over that time, and really just came here today to, answer any questions you all might have about that.
I think one point, a couple of points that I found interesting about your presentation were how some things like interviewing faculty, I guess for new positions, wasn't really interrupted per se, but something like international partnerships, it's hard, you have the existing ones you have and they can be maintained, but perhaps seeking new relationships is just not really happening right now. So I kind of thought that some of the contrasts was interesting about what is either the same or can be facilitated, and then what aspects are kind of on hold or maybe not, you're not able to continue things in a way you would want to. So if there are others that you'd want to talk about or speak to those specifically, because I know a lot of doc students who are looking for jobs right now, and so that interviewing piece is really weighing on them.
Yeah, I would add, Heather, on the international partnerships, it depends upon the culture of the institution and the country that you're trying to partner with. Several of them they really expect you at a person visit where you're going to experience the culture and taste the food and drink the drink. And I've had all kinds of things shoved in my face that I never thought I would eat before as part of international partnerships and so forth. But it becomes, I think, a way of building trust between the two entities, and they want to make sure that you can understand and appreciate their culture as part of it. So I think the new partnerships areas where we already have some existing partnerships have been challenging to expand and build upon. I think that the ones where we already have existing partnerships in some ways, because people are more willing to use Zoom and video conferencing, we've actually been able to get some work done on things that would normally take much longer, where we might have one annual visit to go to that partner during the year, and then they come and visit us the next year. We're actually getting work done in between those, what would have been visits for us.
I'll add just to the interview part. Again, I don't know if we have any doc students or individuals looking for positions, but I can say that what I've found to be interesting is in like a teaching presentation. So my just a piece of advice, because that part is sorry, my daughter, I don't know how to stop it. Sorry. Is that you're technically teaching online. So you really need to make sure that you are able to teach as well in that environment as you would face to face, because that's what the committee and that's what folks who are watching the presentation are looking for and looking at. So being able to really engage students in an online environment, that may not come naturally if that's not an experience somebody's had. So practicing those skills, to me, that's been the biggest difference, because the interviews are interviews, question, answer, not too different. But that teaching piece and showing that you can do that in the online environment, because all you have is that, right? And so just making sure you're up to date and practicing those skills and being able to engage students in that environment is really what I've seen as kind of the difference maker between candidates.
We've been doing a lot of interviews at Susan Brown Foster's alma mater, over this past year, and I can tell you that there have been some candidates that sometimes it's harder to make that personal connection over Zoom, but there are candidates who have been able to do that, and maybe it's through research where they've gone through and they've studied the CVs of the individuals that they're going to be connecting with, and they may see hobbies or interests or some other types of something unique about that person's background, and they've been able to make that connection. I think sometimes it's harder to do that in Zoom, and then the awkward silences when nobody says anything seem even more awkward in Zoom, because everybody's just kind of staring at the screen and looking at each other. So I think the candidates who have been able to I think interviewing online is probably a slightly different skill that doesn't fully transfer from interviewing face to face. And so I think that the candidates who have been able to make those connections early on and are well prepared have been at a competitive advantage against the other finalists for the position. So something to keep in mind.
Heather, one thing that.
Oh,
go ahead.
We have a question from Colleen Coles.
Go ahead, Heath. Go ahead and finish before I ask, because I'm going to shift focus here.
All right, awesome. I just got a real quick comment. So our capstone course that we have for our seniors, we've actually implemented a kind of do's and don'ts through Zoom kind of tutorial. We've introduced that as part of the learning criteria, because our students that are graduating undergraduate, obviously they're going to go on and doing some interviews right now. And so it's always good to have kind of like a crash course on Zoom, especially for our students, because they're going to be utilizing it probably in the first or second round interviews. Back to you, ma'am. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So my question is, I know you're all, you've all taught, but you're all administrators. One of the things I'd love to get your feedback on is how you all handled, like for us, the legal liability with placing interns during COVID and getting the feedback, and how much you as administrators, how you handled that in terms of, like, I struggled with, okay, they're not going to get the state required contact hours. I've got to get creative here in how are we going to allow that? And from you all as administrators, did you have to come up with waivers or any signed things for any of the interns in your programs that were going out into actual face-to-face placements? I mean, I'd just love to hear how this happened for all of you, because ours, I'll admit, was a bit chaotic at best.
I can speak at the university level at FSU. Initially, there was a push to require all internship experiences to be remote. And then there were some of the colleges kind of pushed back on that, saying that there were critical milestones that students wouldn't be able to get enough hours, whether it was nursing or college of medicine and other different areas. And so they put in a waiver that the students would have to sign going for it. Plus, we also had to partner with the host sites, and they had to agree that they would support and implement the CDC guidelines for best practices during the placements for the face-to-face internships as part of that. And if they didn't provide that assurance, we didn't allow the site placement to go forward. So, but the legal team got involved with it very early at FSU, and help the process move fairly smoothly. We also have a college level entity that helps guide and support all the internships for all the programs in the college, for sport management, for teacher education and counseling and so forth. So it wound up being fairly organized here.
We were fairly similar to that. We shut down all internships. And the same thing happened. There were some exceptions that were made, not in our college. So all of our teacher ed and sport management students did not go into any field experience until actually this semester we have students out. But it was as Damon mentioned, there was a waiver form that was created for those exceptions. I don't know moving forward. So we did not have to do that for sport management. I think that was something that happened early, but then kind of, I think, as we tried to get a little bit back to normal, and that policy loosened on letting students back into their internships, we didn't all have to have waivers. So our sport management students did not have to have waivers signed when they went back in.
We actually had something a little different at Columbus State. Actually, it was a statewide thing, a little different than the experiences my colleagues just talked about. The state of Ohio actually pushed forward something in law to basically say that institutions that had these required internships as part of the degree program could not be liable if a student had to go out to an experience and they were to have obtained the virus. The state government actually pushed that forward. I don't know if it actually passed or not, but in our set of circumstances, I think much like Jennifer said, we had some things that you essentially couldn't get the degree per state requirements, nursing, things like that. But with sport management, we found creative ways. We don't have to have that for sport management, at least in my state. So the students were able to substitute courses and things of that nature for sport management.
I will say it was kind of interesting for the non-internship courses that are not associated with academic credit. So we have different activities that we will typically organize for our students, whether it go to volunteer at the national championship, a college football game, or the Super Bowl and so forth. And we'll not only coordinate that, but we'll provide transportation and other types of things. This year, the program kind of backed off on the organize. We made it very clear to students, you're volunteering to do this on your own. And you're going to need to arrange transportation and so forth on your own. This is an extracurricular activity that's not university sponsored. So we did see some changes in non-credit based experiential learning activities.
We have a question from Dr. Foster. Would you like me to read that, or would you like to ask?
I'll go ahead, and it's in the chat. Yeah, I'm just wondering if if you allowed students to do their internship, if any institution said, okay, well, we'll help, but we're not going to pay just so we can accommodate you. Did anybody experience that?
I didn't see that so I don't think that happened with us. I think if they were previously paid, as far as I know, they maintained that status. Not all of our students are in paid internships, but I do believe those that were able to get a paid internship were still able to do that. It's kind of early yet. So this is our first semester back in. So that's just not something I heard as an issue. So I don't think that happened with our student and internships.
Next, we have a question from Heather Alderman.
I was wondering if there are, because some of you are in colleges with other programs where the experiential learning component is critical to their licensure, or like if you're a nurse, you really need to do some nursing in order to be a nurse. But if, and you all are sympathetic to sport management experiential learning, not just sympathetic, but supportive of that as a really critical component of the degree programs. But there are institutions where faculty may not have that and are maybe having to fight for retaining that experiential learning. So what advice would you have for those faculty and how to approach their administrators to really indicate how important that component is, and that there's other things to do besides going somewhere, that maybe there are some other flexible types of internships that can be done?
Well, I can say this, and Damon may jump in and agree, but we have, in Florida, we have a funding metric that includes graduation. Getting employed after graduation. And so I think a strong case can be made if we ever had our backs against the wall for that there is a need for our students to be gaining that practical experience and an internship in order to be employed. So I think that would work for an institution like mine. I can't imagine that. And we're a Carnegie engaged institution. So there's just a lot of reasons for us that I don't think that we would ever be asked not to do it. It would have to be, again, given the global pandemic, and that would be a reason, but barring that, we would not have a problem making a case for our students.
At FSU several years ago, FSU instituted a university-wide requirement for experiential learning for all undergraduate programs. At the time, I think FSU was the largest university in the country that was requiring that. And so I think there's some built-in support for it. But I was still kind of surprised that they were immediately wanting to revert everything to remote right away. But I think as they learned and saw for some of the programs, you just can't simulate that environment remotely. I was talking to the education dean at Oklahoma State not too long ago, and they have an aviation program in their college, and the ability to try to do some of that stuff online is just not the same.
I will just. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just going to say, I would say the same with teaching students and in the medical fields. I don't think you want to go to a nurse who's never actually worked on real patients. So yeah, but flying a plane, I hope my pilot has done that before. A lot.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say, yeah, there are certain accreditors and state agencies, and then national agencies. So aviation, obviously FAA, their curriculum for aviation maintenance is what we have, and their curriculum actually exceeds the state maximum and what we're supposed to have for a 2-year degree. Their curriculum actually exceeds that, and they're allowed to do that because it's nationally regulated. So it's certainly made a lot of very interesting situations on how students were going to continue some things and some things not. And the level of the, let's just say the jurisdiction, if you will, of the accreditor or the state agency had a lot to do with that.
I'm breaking protocol. I'm not going to type my question in the box, but so for all of you in these administrative roles, what do you see as now your biggest challenges moving forward into summer and next fall? I mean, I know for us, I'm being told classroom capacities are this, oops, but they might be that, or we might be doing hybrids, but you never know. And, we have faculty with children who are trying to figure out daycare, but I'm curious from your perspective, now where do you see it from an administrator's perspective? Like what challenges are going to remain as we move through summer into fall?
I think the course schedule that you touched on is probably going on a lot of universities right now. Normally FSU would already have its summer and fall schedule published and in the books, and we'd be talking about spring 2022 right about now. So those, timelines have been delayed as a result of that, and the time for students to be able to register for courses is going to be a little bit compressed, and we'll have to work through that. Right now, they're telling us that summer semester at FSU is pretty much going to be the same as what spring semester is, where there's a lot of hybrid, a lot of remote classes. But for the fall semester, based upon the timeline of when we are scheduled to be getting all of our vaccines and so forth in, we're expecting to really be able to have the entire university community vaccinated by end of spring, beginning of summer. But as a extra layer of caution, they're going to go ahead and make summer a lot like spring. But then fall semester, we're asked to go ahead and schedule our fall semester classes as if they're going to be face-to-face, and the classrooms are not going to require social distancing. So we're starting with that, and then we can always back away from that. But that's how we're inputting the courses into the schedule and moving forward. The university is not going to allow, I guess they instituted a new delivery mechanism that they called remote instead of, we have online, which are online courses that were always going to be online and delivered online, and we still call that online, but remote would be face-to-face courses that were temporarily shifted to online as a result of the pandemic. And so we will not have that modality as an option for the fall semester. Our faculty will either be able to do a hybrid where there'll be simultaneous in-class and online options. There'll be a face-to-face option, and then there'll be a fully online option that is just for classes that have the proper university approvals to be delivered online. That's definitely a big issue right now.
We're exactly the same place, which you would imagine 2 states, Florida schools, and we're in literally the exact same place that Damon they just sent out an email yesterday that room capacities were back to pre-COVID numbers. Now I do know we will still require masking, but not the social distancing piece. I'm a little bit more concerned. I think if you ask like a worry, I go back to that jobs piece. I think we all probably will have a little bit of concern of how the sport industry will rebound and how the job market will look for our graduates. So, I think that's something that, it concerns me and, as a parent, and then also as an administrator, I know that's something that we hope, because it really is going to depend on how quickly the sport industry rebounds. I can imagine that it will go back, but how quickly, and people are going to feel comfortable being in, stadiums and arenas and such. So that'll be interesting to see.
Colleen, I can speak from a small private school. We've actually been back in session live since August. We came back in August with all face-to-face classes. March through May was the only time we were completely remote and online. We came back in August face-to-face, and we came back in the spring face-to-face as well. Beginning of fall semester was difficult. We had, several cases, and I had a couple of high-risk faculty members that did do online classes. But last week, I've already submitted my summer, fall, spring 22 schedule and kind of going about business as usual on that aspect. I would say, so from my administrative point of view, it's more so about making sure all of my on ground classes are equated across the board as being able to be 100% online. So for example, if we did have to go 100% online, there would be no issues at all. It would be the same format within we use Canvas. So traditional online class. So the master shell would kind of just work its way across the board there.
I think it will also be interesting to see how universities adapt different student services, the advising, counseling, parking, housing, all of those other different student support entities across campus are kind of a little bit in the dark to figure out what the model's going to look like for the fall semester and what to adapt. It, you know, advising here at FSU, the administration's been holding up a traditional face-to-face advising model as something that's responsible for our very high retention rate, the top 10 in the country. And yet we've shifted that online, and we're actually finding that students are preferring, some of them are preferring that online. So I think that there will probably be, you know, an online advisor on-call availability through an app that will stay on after the pandemic. It's going to be interesting, some of the changes, positive changes that will result as a result of the pandemic.